Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today, I'm thinking about the 2022 race for the governor of Massachusetts. Specifically, one of the GOP candidates, this guy by the name of Geoff Diehl. I came across an interview that Geoff Diehl did right after he announced his entry into the GOP primary. He appeared on the Record, which is ABC News Channel 5 in the area, and he was interviewed by Ed Harding and Janet Wu. And one of the things that strikes me in this interview is that Geoff Diehl has a January 6th problem bad. You see, after Donald Trump lost a free and fair election in 2020, he tried to stay in office. Now, this plan had multiple moving parts, but it culminated in a violent attack on the U.S. Congress on January 6, 2021, while Congress was trying to certify the electoral count. On January 6, Trump supporters attacked and beat police officers, sprayed them with chemical irritants and bear mace. There were bombs recovered on the scene. This was a bad time. And now, in response to that, there have been some Republicans who have stepped up and said, this is not what America is supposed to be. And those Republicans, even if you disagree with them, really deserve your kudos. They really deserve your praise, because even if you disagree with someone, you should be able to put this country ahead of your own private, personal beliefs. But there are many Republicans who are just incapable of doing that. So let's hear Geoff Diehl get asked directly about January 6th and his close association with Trump.
Let's turn to Donald Trump. You have supported him. You were co-chair of his Massachusetts campaign in 2016. So do you think that Donald Trump holds any responsibility for the January 6th invasion of the U.S. Capitol? And should he be held accountable if so?
Well, let's see how Geoff answers. That scoff is the sound of an uncomfortable man. That's somebody who doesn't want to be asked this question and certainly doesn't want to answer it.
Well, first of all, I'm all for that investigation into January 6th because I think things happen that everybody wants to know about.
This is a lie. Now, I'm not sure which investigation Mr. Diehl is referring to, but there are some very clear indicators that Mr. Diehl has zero interest in figuring out what happened on January 6th. He's lying. First, let's note the date of this interview again. It's July 25th, 2021. Mr. Diehl is in support of that commission. On May 19th, 2021, a clear 2 months before this interview, House Democrats and 35 House Republicans passed an independent commission. What this independent commission would do is it would investigate the attack on January 6th. It wouldn't be conducted by partisans. It would be based on the 9/11 commission model. Now, 35 Republicans crossed the aisle on this one. Leadership was against it. Mitch McConnell and Speaker McCarthy were against it, but still, 35 Republicans managed to put country ahead of party and decided, yeah, we want to know what's going on. We want to know what happened on January 6th, no matter where the facts lead. No, that was to be a bipartisan effort. But apparently a bipartisan effort to find facts is too much of a partisan thing for Republicans these days. Because Mitch McConnell opposed this sucker in the Senate, despite the fact that 6 GOP senators voted for this January 6th commission, the independent commission. 35 senators didn't even want to vote on it. 35 senators stopped 54 senators from creating an independent commission to investigate January 6th. Now, wrap your head around that. There was an independent commission that was defeated by just 35 Republicans. Now, if you're a Republican like Mr. Diehl, who really wants to get to the facts, you'd assume that he's throwing his support behind those 6 who are crossing the aisle, right? Unfortunately, I can find no record of Mr. Diehl supporting the passage of this independent bipartisan commission. He supports this commission. He wants to know what's going on, but he dare not make a statement in public. It's also worth noting at this point that Geoff Diehl has a ringing endorsement from Donald Trump. Do we really think that Donald Trump would give his endorsement to someone who sided with the likes of Susan Collins? No, absolutely not. I don't think so. In response, Nancy Pelosi had to go ahead and create her own House Select Committee on July 1st, 2021. Is Mr. Diehl saying that he supports that committee? The one founded by Nancy Pelosi? Well, if so, shouldn't that also mean he would have supported that other one? See, I have looked up and down for statements of where Mr. Diehl stood at the time. I can find nothing on his Twitter page indicating his support or opposition for anything. I looked on his website. There was nothing there. I found a Boston Herald article that came out around the time the House committee was formed. However, the topic just didn't come up. Now, Mr. Diehl, you cannot want to be the Republican governor of Massachusetts, the leader of Massachusetts Republicans, and not take a stance on this paramount issue. I mean, this is not like taking a dodge on a question about a tax hike or, some other nuanced issue. This is about life and death of democracy, sir. If you want to know what's going on, I suggest you manage to say so without scoffing beforehand.
I think it was an awful situation, just like I think all the riots in 2020 in cities across the country were awful.
You're going to see this time and time and again when Mr. Diehl answers questions. He will appear to kind of address the question directly and then quickly pivot to something that's very unrelated. And in fact, trying to link January 6th to Black Lives Matter rallies in 2020 is a very popular tactic on the right. And it's wholly dishonest. Now, we could pull up research studies that looked at the rallies in 2020 and found that only about 4% involved any kind of property damage, only 1% involved any injury to police. We could also point out that in the weeks after George Floyd was murdered by a police officer on video, somewhere between 15 to 26 million people took to the streets to protest in favor of racial equality, to protest against violence against black folks. We could point that out. We could point out that unlike the terrorist attack on our capital, the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement that is not centrally organized. It is something that is diffuse, and it's been growing over the last decade or so, at least since the killing of Trayvon Martin. And not only that, but Black Lives Matter is part of like an international movement where people of color who are oppressed and repressed in different places are standing up to assert their rights. It's kind of a beautiful thing, but we won't even mention that. All we want to point out is that our nation's capital was attacked. And Mr. Diehl, all you could manage to say was, it was awful, before criticizing black folks. That's just... Can we talk about what we're talking about and stay on topic, sir?
But I don't think that he was necessarily responsible for it.
The January 6th attack was not a spontaneous action. It was a planned event. That violence happened that day was not against the plan. It was very much part of the plan. And in fact, it goes to this whole entire effort of the Trump administration to try to overturn, again, a free and fair election that they lost. I don't think anybody breaks this down any better than Chuck Todd did on the January 2nd episode of Meet the Press in 2022. This clip gets a little long, but it's worth a watch.
We've learned that the riot was not merely an explosion of violence prompted by Donald Trump's speech, but the result of post-election planning by anti-small d Democratic forces at the highest level, up to and including the then-sitting President of the United States, to overturn the election and subvert the will of the American people. Election night 2020, Trump declares victory long before all the votes are counted. November 4th, a Trump ally texts White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Here's an aggressive strategy. Why can't the states of Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and other R-controlled state houses declare this is BS, where conflicts and election not called that night, and just send their own electors to vote and have it go to the Supreme Court? November 9th, Meadows meets with Trump allies, and according to the New York Times, they settle on a strategy to continue to hammer home the idea the election was tainted. November 19th, Trump lawyers Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell hold a bizarre news conference.
The massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba.
Trump's campaign lawyers file 62 federal and state lawsuits challenging the election results. 61 are denied. December 1st, Attorney General Bill Barr tells the Associated Press that the Justice Department did not find widespread fraud. He would resign 2 weeks later. But beginning December 15th, Trump pressures Justice Department officials at least 9 times to overturn Biden's legitimate victory, including at a meeting on January 3rd when he threatens to replace acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen with loyalist Jeffrey Clark to carry out his scheme. December 18th, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and lawyer Sidney Powell pushed Mr. Trump to consider declaring martial law or to sign executive orders to seize voting equipment. December 21st, Mr. Trump meets members of the Freedom Caucus to discuss their plans. January 2nd, he appeals directly to Georgia's Secretary of State, demanding he produce more votes in a state Joe Biden won.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
Mr. Trump, Meadows, members of Congress, and attorneys for Mr. Trump's campaign hold a call with some 300 state and local officials to discuss overturning some states' electoral college results on January 6th. Donald Trump also begins to lobby Vice President Mike Pence publicly and privately to deny Biden the 270 electoral votes he needs. January 4th, Trump and Pence meet at the White House with lawyer John Eastman about his memo laying out steps Pence could take to delay certification and keep Trump in power. Meanwhile, planning for the January 6th rally steps up.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
And January 6th, Mr. Trump urges protesters.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
During the riot, Meadows texts with at least one rally planner who tells him, "Things have gotten crazy and I desperately need some direction. Please," as more than half a dozen others reach out to him begging Trump to intervene.
As always, link in the description to the full thing. If any conspiracy theorists out there like to connect dots, those are some dots for you to connect. Have fun.
I think that there's been plenty of political leaders that say, come to Washington and express, your political views during marches.
But that's not what Donald Trump and his supporters asked. Donald Trump and his supporters were planning to come armed. They were planning to come to fight. They were planning to come and start a civil war if they needed to. This was not a group of peaceful protesters coming and, coming to take in the sights.
I think it just was something that unfortunately got out of hand by bad actors that came that day.
Yes, there were bad actors in attendance that day. Bad actors like the Oath Keepers. Now, the Oath Keepers, ironically named, because they're now under criminal indictment for seditious conspiracy against the United States of America. Now, did the Oath Keepers just show up? No. Noted Trump associates like Roger Stone were using these guys as security. Yeah, there were bad actors there. Yeah, they were there to try to make things get out of hand. But they were invited by Donald Trump and his people. Now, in a moment, Janet Wu is going to bring this back home for us and, throw some cold water of reality. Because, again, Mr. Diehl is seriously misrepresenting what happened on January 6th.
And he's not responsible by telling them to go to the Capitol and tell them to let people know exactly how they feel about the election?
I served in the legislature. We had a lot of advocacy groups tell people to come into the State House, come to our offices and tell us exactly how they feel about bills. I don't see how that's his responsibility.
And Mr. Diehl, when you were in state legislature, did the governor of Massachusetts ever order his supporters into the State House to stop the certification of an election that he lost? Ever in your time did people come in armed and try to bomb party headquarters outside? Did the people you are speaking of ever storm the Massachusetts State House and spray bear mace in the faces of police, murdering one and killing more? Did the people that you are referring to ever come into your place of work with bear mace, chanting, "Hang Karen Polito," Lieutenant Governor, spraying bear mace at the police and killing people? I suspect the answer is no, and you are being dishonest with this comparison. So here's the obvious question that Ed Harding asks next. Donald Trump runs in 2024. Are you going to support him? Watch Geoff Diehl squirm.
Of course I supported him in 2016. I think the policies are fantastic. He hasn't announced that he's running, so of course that's a decision to be made. Right. If he does run, I would, if the policies are same, I think I would support him.
That was the longest yes you ever heard, right? Now we will really plumb the depths of Mr. Diehl's depravity. Janet Wu is about to ask him specifically about whether Joe Biden won.
Do you think this election was stolen from him, from Donald Trump?
I don't know. I don't think you or anybody knows at this point.
That's a lie. Geoff Diehl should know it's a lie. By July 25th, 2021, there was already ample evidence that lies about election fraud were just that. They were lies. Over 60 times, Trump attorneys tried to bring these fraud claims to court, and each time they got thrown out. And when they brought these fraud claims to courts, they consistently said this was not about fraud. So they're lying. I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to document some of the baloney. Go read the work of Jen Fifield from the Arizona Republic if you really want to see what was going on. But Mr. Diehl is either lying because he's aware of the evidence, or he's not aware of the evidence and is just repeating the lies that other people have told him. Either one of those makes this person unfit for any position of responsibility or power.
I think that states are looking at their election procedures to see if they, if policy is tight to make sure that you've got valid election laws?
Yes, Mr. Diehl. Several states are looking at their election laws to see if policies is tight. But they're doing this in response to lies about election fraud. But again, Mr. Diehl is being dishonest with you and being dishonest with the interviewers. See, what's happening in these states is that in the 2020 election, there was record turnout in a number of places. Turnout was way up, in part due to COVID measures. Mail-in balloting was a lot easier, drop boxes, early voting, that sort of thing. And you know what? More voting is a positive thing for our system of government, for our country, for our society. Even if you're going to go vote for somebody I think is a ding-dong, it's still good that you go out and vote, that you spend time thinking about public issues and form an opinion. I think it's an unqualified good. But in these states, it threw the election to Joe Biden. Places like Georgia, where you had a razor-thin margin. Well, Georgia legislatures who are Republicans want to find a way to take that margin back. Yeah, they're needling around the rules of the game, right? And some folks say, oh, well, it's not a big deal. But I think the big deal is this, is that we found something that works really well, that allows a lot of people to vote. And there are elites in this country, primarily from the Republican Party, who don't want us to vote. No, that's what's really going on, Mr. Diehl. And I think you know that.
I think here in Massachusetts, I know that Jim Lyons, the chairman of the Republican Party, is getting ready to put forward a voter ID ballot question. So I think we'll have that discussion even more robustly over the next year.
Remember, the question was, do you think the election was stolen from Donald Trump? And now he's talking about a voter ID ballot question that Republicans want to introduce. The question in no way invited that topic to come up. Now, you see this happen with a lot of politicians, so I can't just harp on Mr. Diehl with this, but politicians understand that they only have so much time on a television show, so if they refuse to answer a question a few times, they can just talk about whatever they want, and the segment will end. You don't answer the question you're asked, you answer the question you want to answer. So that's what Mr. Diehl's doing here. He's just pivoting hard and trying to talk about something that he feels is politically advantageous to him. Now, hey, maybe it'll work for him. We elect a lot of people who do that. But I don't think it's working out for us. Can we stop electing people like this?
You don't want to weigh in on that right now.
Janet.
Oh, no, I don't. I can't tell you whether he did or did not. It did not get stolen.
Yes, you can. It did not get stolen.
I tend to doubt there was an overall steal effort.
But Mr. Diehl, that's what's being alleged. Nobody's alleging that there were a bunch of innocent little errors that resulted in Joe Biden's accidentally winning. The lie on the table, the lie that you seem to be sort of like half defending and half backing away from, is that China, Venezuela, and the Republican governor of Arizona all teamed up to throw the election to Joe Biden. That's the lie. That's what they're arguing. What is it that you think happened?
But I think some states, maybe had different election laws.
Yes. Some states have different election laws. But notice how he's trying to get out of the question.
Even if all the evidence seems to indicate it was not, at least the overwhelming evidence now.
Yeah, well, look, I also don't think that the 2016 election was stolen by Russian agents trying to get Donald Trump in. So
the question was not about 2016, nor was it about Russian interference in the 2016 election on behalf of Donald Trump. The question again is still, do you think the election was stolen from Donald Trump? You have said that you don't know. You've said that nobody knows. You've also said that you don't believe there was a wide-ranging conspiracy. Now, that last sentence about 2016 seems to imply that, oh yeah, well, everybody's a little off. So what is your actual stance, sir?
I think both parties seem to be very reluctant to accept the results sometimes of our recent elections.
Again, this is a lie. In the year 2000, Al Gore won the popular vote. Now, the vote in Florida was so close that a recount was needed. Rather than count the votes and give the election to the winner, the Supreme Court intervened. Now, I guarantee you there were people on the Al Gore side who said, we got to fight this in the streets. This is ridiculous. George Bush on his inauguration day got pelted with eggs. It was great. But Al Gore himself went on TV and conceded the race.
Let there be no doubt. While I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession. I know that many of my supporters are disappointed. I am too. But our disappointment must be overcome by our love of country.
That's what somebody who's going to put this country above themselves would do. That's what an honest person would do. Flash forward to 2016, where Hillary Clinton again won the popular vote, but just lost the electoral vote. She conceded immediately. She didn't fight this out. She didn't extend the pain at all. She conceded. She didn't have Joe Biden try to decertify electors in certain states. She conceded. Because that's what somebody who believes there's something bigger than themselves does. Donald Trump didn't do that. I mean, it's only Republicans who have done this. It's only Trump supporters who have invaded the Capitol like this, Mr. Diehl. You cannot have a both sides about this. You support someone. You have backed someone who has betrayed this country. And rather than stand up and call their betrayal what it is, a rank betrayal, you continue to sort of pussyfoot around for political gain. And I think if you were a true believer, maybe I'd give you a little bit more credit. But the fact that you don't seem to believe your own baloney here just makes it all the more galling. No person who supports Trump or failed to condemn the violence on January 6th and the attempt on our democracy can have any position of responsibility or power ever again. They have disqualified themselves forever. Whatever your positive qualities, Mr. Diehl, your inability to be honest on this issue disqualifies you from any position of responsibility or power or trust. And until you can figure out where you stand, it really doesn't matter where you stand on any other issue. The first issue for us is democracy. And I don't know that I can trust you on that one. Now, anyway, that's going to be it for me. You've been great. Hope to see you again next time. But until then, keep thinking.
Now I'm busy with this mule.
And I say to our fellow members of the world community, let no one see this contest as a sign of American weakness. The strength of American democracy is shown most clearly through the difficulties it can overcome.